Welcome to A Real Affliction, BPD, Culture, and Stigma, a podcast devoted to exploring how we experience, treat, write about, advocate for, and conceptualize borderline personality disorder. My name is Cynthia Gralla. I'm a writer and teacher with a history of BPD. Trigger warning, this episode will mention suicide. It's common for people with BPD to speak about building a life worth living. Dialectical behavior therapy creator and fellow BPD sufferer, Marsha Linehan, even named her memoir after this idea. Today, I want to talk about building a life worth living through and despite memories, based on my recent experiences in therapy and a rewatch of the masterful 1998 Japanese film, Afterlife. Afterlife was directed by Hirokazu Kore-eda. I first saw the film about 25 years ago, shortly after its release, and while I was studying Japanese literature and film at Berkeley. Kore-eda is known for hard-hitting films like 2018's Shoplifters, which critiques crime and poverty within the Japanese welfare system and the idea of found families. Afterlife is a gentler but infinitely rewarding film which meditates on life, death, the persistence of love, and above all, memory. Afterlife starts at the beginning of the work week in a way station between life and death, in a drab, unheated building that looks like every single ward office that I've ever been to in Japan. A group of dedicated workers ushers the newly deceased through 7 days in limbo. During this week, the dead people will have to choose their most precious memory. Once they do, the staff will lovingly recreate and record the scene in the style of an amateur fan film. On the 7th day, the group of dead people convenes in the screening room. At the moment that each relives their most treasured memory by watching the film, they pass into eternity, which they will spend with that singular, shining moment, forgetting everything else that they endured in life. For example, one man chooses the memory of the breeze he felt while riding the tram to school. One woman chooses the memory of eating rice balls with her parents in a bamboo grove. One old man chooses the memory of the light on the cliff where he tried to die by suicide at age 20. A young girl chooses the memory of lying on her mother's lap. One old woman chooses the memory of dancing with her brother to a song called Red Shoes when she was a little girl. And one woman, a prostitute, chooses the memory of looking out at the snow with a gentle customer, but later she admits that this memory was a lie. To recreate these prized moments, the staff rely on simple special effects. For one woman remembering falling cherry blossoms, the staff shakes a basket of fake pink petals over her head. To convey that it's a hot day on the tram, they spritz the man's face with water to imply that he's sweating. The staff are like a cross between low-level bureaucrats and supernatural archivists. In polite Japanese, they explain to each client that they are now dead and efficiently offer the prescribed condolences. For a dead person who is stumped about a memory to select from an unremarkable life, they can recall a batch of videotapes containing scenes from that person's existence on Earth, mysteriously recorded. The vibe of the film is reminiscent of a less cringy workplace mockumentary like The Office, although the film predates the popularity of that television genre. The staff is cautioned by their boss not to identify with the newly dead clients. It's only a job, he says. Yet the staff have their own secrets. The people who work there, it is revealed, couldn't or wouldn't choose their one memory after death and remained in limbo to help others. I won't spoil the twist that has to do with one of the staff members, but it is so moving and beautiful. The neurodegenerative disease of Kore-eda's grandfather partly inspired this film. When Kore-eda was 5 years old, he witnessed his grandfather's gradual forgetting and wondered, does everyone forget all memories before they die? But he got the idea for the plot from a stint as an assistant director in television when he first started his career. In that job, he had to transcribe many interviews. He asked himself what would happen if he had to watch his life on video in the afterlife. Incidentally, when asked which memory he'd choose, Kore-eda once said that he would prefer to join the staff and spend eternity polishing his directorial skills. Afterlife was originally conceived as a 1-hour TV drama. Kore-eda conducted around 500 interviews, which he drew on for the characters' chosen memories while also adding in fictional memories. He found many of the interviewees at welfare centers for retirees. People talked about the war, their days as students, food, and sex. Particular tastes were often mentioned, sensations. In an interview, Kore-eda said that he felt as if the elderly interviewees were unreeling the Showa era, which spanned 1926 to 1989, before his eyes, and he was surprised that many people chose to hold on to a painful memory. When it came time to film Afterlife, Kore-eda used both professional actors and amateurs to portray a select few of these interviewees. In combining documentary and fictional narrative, the memories his actors share reflect what memories truly are, a mixture of reality and fantasy. Sometimes we even acknowledge the fault lines of remembering. The prostitute who fabricates a memory was inspired by one interviewee who shared an interesting story, but when asked to act in the film, admitted that they had made it up. Like the staff in the film, Kore-eda had to translate the interviewees' memories into images. In fact, Afterlife is a film about filmmaking and how the images we retain in our minds make meaning for us at the same time that we remake these images over the years. The movie is about how images make life livable for us, even when they're distressing. Viet Nguyen, the award-winning author of The Sympathizer, who wrote an essay about Afterlife for its Criterion Blu-ray release, suggests that our memories are like short movies, and perhaps great movies feel for a while like eternity. When Afterlife won a prize at the San Sebastian International Film Festival, the judges praised its empathy for nostalgia. The Japanese word for nostalgic, natsukashi, is used in conversation far more often than we use nostalgic in English. Even in the film, the young girl who chooses the smell of her mother as she lay in her lap remarks that the moment was natsukashi. In other words, our favorite memories are generated by moments that already feel familiar at the time of their unfolding. They are moments that feel like a return home. In our imagination, through these memories, we experience eternal homecoming. The Japanese title of Afterlife is Wonderful Raifu, spelled out in the phonetic script used for foreign words, emphasis, and some slang. Kore-eda has said that he thinks of it as a life-affirming movie, and I feel the same. He also believes that its main theme is the mutability of memories. I agree with that as well, especially because I happened to rewatch the film while undergoing EMDR therapy. After I started experiencing symptoms of perimenopause a few years back, I felt more vulnerable than I had in years. I decided that I needed to do what had previously been unthinkable to me. After decades of bad experiences with clinicians, I decided to return to therapy. Over the past 2 years, I've participated in talk therapy that drew on internal family systems, mindfulness courses, and CBT courses. I've also been undergoing EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. This therapeutic method attempts, through bilateral stimulation, to superimpose new memories over traumatic ones. The stimulation may take forms other than eye movement, including manual tapping of the patient's fingers or toes, or wearable devices that produce alternating somatosensory currents. According to experts, EMDR can help resolve and reprocess memories of traumatic experiences that can contribute as risk precipitating and predisposing factors to the development of mental disorders. While EMDR up until now has not typically been offered to those patients for whom BPD is the primary concern, a 2023 pilot study found that the treatment is safe and effective for borderlines, especially among those with comorbid PTSD. Given that the vast majority of people with BPD have suffered childhood trauma, EMDR is something that I think will be more often considered for borderlines in the future. EMDR sounded wacky to me at first, but Samantha, one of my oldest and shrewdest friends, and a trained social worker who now oversees a huge team for the nation's largest nonprofit private mental health care provider, assured me that she encourages anyone who's had traumatic experiences to do EMDR. So with her endorsement, I decided to try it. At my first meeting with Linehan, my therapist, I had to tell her my story. She listened. I liked her. In particular, I liked her passionate conviction that EMDR could change lives. We spent the first 2 sessions talking about my past. Linehan asked me to write down my worst and best memories, 10 of each. Just the headlines, she said. And I found that writing short descriptors for the bad ones often felt worse than writing about them at length in my memoir. In the 3rd session, she asked me to go over a list of negative beliefs so that she could understand which ones tormented me most. Among other statements, I selected, "I don't deserve love," and "I am permanently damaged." By the 4th session, we were ready to begin EMDR. The way it worked was while I was undergoing that bilateral stimulation, she would ask me to describe one of the worst memories. Then she would add details to the scenario that hadn't existed at the time and that made me feel safe. She was trying to rewire that memory so that when I thought back to that moment, instead of feeling scared or vulnerable or violated, I felt secure. Tinkering with memory isn't a new concept. In fact, our brains do it all the time. In the act of retrieving a memory, we make it more likely to be retrievable at a later date. We make that memory more memorable. But we may also change, add, or remove small details, especially in the case of traumatic memories. As one researcher explained, after a traumatic experience, intentional remembering, effortful retrieval, and unintentional remembering, intrusive mental imagery, can introduce new details that, over time, assimilate into a person's memory for the event. Thus, revisiting a moment of trauma is sort of like kintsugi, the Japanese art of patching broken pottery with gold, with altered details, the inlay. This altering is amplified when we share the memory with someone else. Based on their reactions, we may heighten or downplay aspects of the story, and when it's time to shelve it once more, those embellishments will be stored away too. This process results in each memory becoming like a collection of Russian dolls nestled within its successive retellings. Retellings of childhood trauma can cause chaos. For instance, satanic scares based on empty or embroidered claims of horrific child abuse, complete with dark rituals and human sacrifice, have popped up in many different places, including Stuart, the city adjacent to the Floridian town where I lived from age 10 to 18 in the 1980s. In the Stuart case, parents of children who attended Glendale Montessori School accused James Tord, the headmaster, of molesting the children as part of a satanic ritual. While he was convicted, he maintained his innocence, and some of the victims admitted later that their hypnosis by a child psychotherapist may have recovered details of the events that didn't actually happen. On the other hand, trauma expert Bessel, author of The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, argues that 19 to 38% of child sexual abuse victims repress memories of the abuse. And the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders has always included memory loss as part of its criteria for PTSD. It's always possible that hypnosis excavates real trauma in such situations. By contrast, EMDR doesn't recover or adjudicate memories. It doesn't attempt to determine which are real nor how accurate they are. Accurate or not, they can still cause us pain. In fact, EMDR actively tries to change the details of memories in order to defang them. People have tried to control and order memories for thousands of years. In the 6th century BC, lyric poet Simonides of Chios is said to have invented the mnemonic technique of the memory palace, since seen in television shows like Sherlock and many movies, which involves visualizing a large space like a mansion and depositing information to be recalled later in different rooms. During a banquet, he left the hall to talk to people outside, and while he was gone, the roof collapsed and crushed everyone inside. Relatives couldn't identify the remains, but Simonides was able to remember exactly who was sitting where, enabling proper burial, and he shared the technique that made it possible. It isn't coincidental that he was preoccupied with memory. The culture of Chios expected men to drink hemlock once they reached 60 to thin the herd on their barren island. Cruel loss heightens the need to recall. Sally Ann warned that the memory reprogramming process may beget new memories. New rooms in my memory palace could be fashioned. Memories are like fireflies, electrifying us with glimpses of our formative experiences. Gradually, I came to understand through EMDR that after years of trawling the past deep night for their glow, trying to figure out what I had repressed from my childhood experiences, what I might need was not to find more fireflies, but to release them. But it's not simple, and it's painful. A friend of mine with BPD is also undergoing EMDR, and we've talked about how it forces us to face memories we'd long tried to avoid. In other words, you may go through a period of feeling worse before you start to feel better when you begin EMDR. Because of this vulnerable phase, I'd be reluctant to recommend it to anyone I didn't know. Still, I wanted to share my thoughts on it at some point during this podcast series, and Afterlife prompted me to do it. Rewatching Afterlife in the midst of this fraught process comforted me. The film provided me with a concrete metaphor for the way we redress and replay memories to sustain our lives, to make life feel infinite. Like the memory recreations in Afterlife, EMDR's techniques are analog, not high-tech, with buzzers cupped on the backside of my knees rather than some sophisticated digital interface. The film also reminded me of the inevitability of memories. EMDR therapy gives me a guide through a process that would occur anyway, these reflections on the past that I can't help seeing over and over again. After all, I don't have the staff of Afterlife to help me brave the past. Memory tampering through EMDR hasn't washed away past moments for me, but it is starting to tint them as a film colorist might do. Even if we do a shoddy job of recreating the past in our heads, often changing and forgetting important details, I believe that a life worth living is a life worth trying to remember. Forgetting is inevitable, and in some cases, a blessing. But we can learn to live with our remaining memories during the short life we have. Thank you for listening. I will be releasing my next episode as scheduled. This was one of those off-the-cuff bonus episodes.